Hey everybody, welcome to Hidden Hustle with Jamie and Craig for Irish Sports Daily on our YouTube page. Obviously going to talk about signing day coming up. Huge signing day for early signing period for Notre Dame on this Wednesday, and the class, it's a really good one. It's going to finish. It's going to finish in the top 10. Probably not a top 5 class based on they weren't really able to add. And I think they're going to be crunched with some numbers in terms of where things stand with some guys coming back, but we'll see. And then I think there's, a chance that there can be some guys added after, but we're going to talk about offense today. And just before we get into individuals, just Greg, give me your overall thoughts on what they're bringing in on the offensive side.
Right. So someone asked me this question on Twitter the other day, just about the class in general. And so I was thinking about it and I thought offensive line elite. I thought tight end elite, given the two of them in conjunction, like maybe neither one elite by themselves, but together it's an elite class. I think Jadarian Price is an elite player. They wanted to, and it's kind of hard to not think about like what could have been with Nicholas Singleton, because he was he's such a dynamic player, and he's such a quality back, and they were very close to landing him, and obviously it didn't work out. He ended up going to Penn State. It was a distance thing in the end. And so then you look at the quarterback situation with Steve Angeli. I guess that's one I kind of want to talk to you about, just in terms of like what maybe could have been, or how the quarterback recruiting came out to. But Steve Angeli, he kind of reminds me of, I guess, like, I don't know. I guess we could talk about it like in terms of Deshaun Kaiser, like the way he throws the ball, but maybe not the way he runs the ball. So we can kind of get into that. And then the receivers, right? That's the kind of the big question mark right now. If they end up with the 3 that they have, that's a very good class. I won't say elite, but I would say it's very good and what they needed. If they end up with just 2 or just 1, then
1 is a disaster.
It's a major question mark. Yeah,
it's a disaster. But 2, I recoverable. We'll see what they can do.
Right.
And we'll see. But I mean, obviously, it's a blow. They decided they were only going to do 3. You could argue with the hits that they've taken in terms of people transferring out, probably should have taken 4. And I think they were trying to be sensitive to do that. But I mean, really, I think this is what I think will be different with Marcus Freeman going forward is I think there's just going to be a lot more aggression of them saying like, I'm sorry, but we have to get this number for this thing. So
yeah,
you got to like, obviously they're not going to try to rock the boat with certain guys who are really elite. Like I'm sure in that 2023 class, they don't want to take too many more D linemen in that class because they have Keon Keeley and Brendan Vernon. But at the same time, they have to make it known that we're going to take an elite guy if it's an elite guy, right? And I think and I think that was this decision to kind of go this way. I mean, it could come back to bite him. We'll see. And that kind of leads into, we'll start with receiver. And, this is really, if you look at all the commits, there's 2 guys here we don't know about. I would say CJ Williams, we're hearing there's good possibility he could decommit. So we might be talking about him, and he could be out of the class before we even put this up. But we'll see. But I mean, in terms of a prospect and why we like him, why don't you go first? Tell me what you like about him, about his game, and any questions you might have about his game.
We're talking about CJ?
CJ, yeah.
Yeah, so CJ, what I like about his game is he's like just a really good wide receiver in terms of he knows how to get open. He knows how to use his body to create space. He knows how to, I guess, I don't want to say bait the DB. It's kind of hard to explain. Like he hides when the ball is coming, basically, with his body language, right? He'll be running, he'll be looking, and the ball's in the air, and it looks like he's still just kind of running a route, like almost waiting for the ball to be thrown. And the next thing you know, like he puts his hands up and catches it, and the DB is like, oh, like the ball's there, but it's just a little bit late. He's very good at doing that. And consequently, he's very good at catching like 50-50 balls or contested catches.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like you want to see more separation from a top 100 player, but at the same time, it's harder to get separation in college. So you want someone who is very good at catching contested passes because you're going to have more contested, reception opportunities in the college game. But that kind of leads into, the concern of his, which is he's not super explosive. He's not I'm afraid of this person, getting a step on me because he's going to be gone, right? Like Will Fuller or like Lorenzo Styles. And that's not really his game. So that's kind of, I don't want to say the negative, but it's just something that he doesn't have this like dynamic play. But he's a very good wide receiver. When Notre Dame, he committed to Notre Dame, he was talking about they pitched him playing in the slot. I think that's a great place for him because he knows how to get in and out of routes. He knows how to find open space. He's been very good at that. Like he plays a lot of slot at Modern Day. He plays a lot of slot on his 7-on-7 team. He can also play outside. So super versatile player. If he ends up not in the class, that's a big blow in my opinion. But that's kind of what I see from him.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame fans should be disappointed. He's a really good player, and I think the thing is with him, for me, is the floor is so high. Like he at bare minimum, he's going to be a guy who can help you. Could he be a wide receiver one? I think there's a chance for him to be, but he's not going to be, like you said, that Fuller type guy who's going to take the top off the defense. That's not his game. And then I think he's got a little bit faster as a senior, but he's never going to be a burner. He's just never going to be that guy. And his game, like you said, it's leverage, route running, winning contested, that observation talking about how he knows when to turn and win, and he can win in late, right? And I think that is big, right? So I think he's a very good player, someone who I would imagine be a good third down type receiver guy who, when you want to get, it's 3rd and 8, you're trying to move the sticks, he's a guy you want to go to. So obviously be a big loss if they don't get him in the class. We'll see. It's always tough getting a modern day kid out of California. I would say it just kind of worked out in the way where sometimes that's what home comes calling for kids, and we'll see what happens. And then next we'll go into Morian Walker, who is another guy that I think as of right now, Mike Frank on IR Sports Daily, he is reported that, and he thinks he's going to be in the class. I know Christian McCollum, he's been all over this. He's heard from sources. They tell him Amorian's going to be in the class. At the same time, the Michigan people think he's going to be in their class. So we don't, it's signing day. Weird stuff happens. Louisiana kids can get a little wild sometimes with decision making stuff. We'll see what happens. But I think, just won a state championship. Really incredible athletic traits. Just long, super long, 6'3", skinny, needs to put on weight. I want to see when this guy puts on, 15, 20 pounds of muscle and what kind of player he's going to be in college then. A lot of teams like him corner. He ran like, in the 4.4 range at Alabama's camp. The guy went and earned all these offers after the fact, missed most of his junior season because of an injury. But there's a lot of the ceiling. He's a guy where the floor is lower because, his production hasn't really been there in high school, not at the same level, not close to like a CJ Williams, but man, the ceiling is high. He could be a wide receiver one. He could be a guy who never plays at all. He could be a wide receiver one, who knows? But I mean, you're taking him because of the talent and the dynamic that he brings. And certainly for a big guy, can sink his hips, get in and out of his breaks. And, obviously with that speed, he can stretch the field and he can win deep. So I think one of those guys that if you said 3 years from now, this guy was one of the top 5 players in the class, it would be maybe a bit of a surprise, but not shocking because he's got that kind of talent.
And that's why they're bringing him in. because of that, right? Like, because he can be that, right? You wouldn't bring in, someone of his stature if you didn't think that that was possible. And the thing about him as a player is, like, he's getting all these defensive back offers, right? Like Alabama offered him as a defensive back. I think Michigan did as well. And it just goes to like speak to his athletic ability and his ability to change direction for such a long player, right? So his hips, like, you can't be 6'4" and as long as him, and have teams offer you as a defensive player if they
Yeah,
don't
it
think you
says a
have,
lot.
if you don't think you have quick feet, or they don't think you have quick hips, and just like you just said, like, he can get in and out of breaks. Like, you can't get those offers if those teams don't see that, right? And he went and camped for them, and he went and worked out for those teams. Um, Part of that is why we think it's a question mark whether he could be in the class, right? Because this kid, he went and he's gone and seen the country, right? And he's been going, to Alabama, and he's been going to Mississippi State. I think 2 weekends ago, he's been to Michigan a bunch of times. He's been to Notre Dame. So he's seen it, and we can't say that his decision won't be well informed. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like you said, the athleticism that he's shown, just as a player, whether it's on offense or defense, gives you the idea that, okay, this kid has a chance to actually be like a real big hit, and that's what you want, right? But you want it in conjunction with someone like CJ Williams, who is a little bit more of a sure thing, right? Like, what you're getting from him. And I think that, we'll probably get into Tobias now. Like, he's kind of the mix of both of those things, where what you're getting, and he's also just like a crazy,
and he's got that super high ceiling.
Right? Just a like elite athlete, great burst, ball skills, all those things. So great after catch too for a tall guy, which is a great trait for him. So yeah, we can get into
I think
Tobias.
Tobias Merriweather, who's out of Washington. A lot of really good players out of Washington, I got to say too. They've really improved the football there. I'm from Pacific Northwest too, and I'll say that I think it's always been an overlooked part of the country in terms of talent, and really there's been a ton of like top 100 level dudes there lately. They play good football there. They play good football, and there's a lot of talent there. Merriweather, also a guy like Walker, plays corner on defense. So you kind of see some of the changes of direction and some of that kind of stuff a little bit smoother than maybe than I originally thought he was. I would say consistency out of his breaks. That's something that I wanted to see him improve on. I think he's not, he's not the most elite guy, getting from 0 to 60 the quickest. I think he's got good long speed, but he's not like a guy who wins with crazy burst, right? But I mean, back shoulder monster. He's gonna line up on the boundary, win, and he's got the kind of like loose athletic traits out of a big guy, and which is rare. And I think if you said 4 years from now, this guy's a day 1 or a day 2 NFL draft pick, you would just think that makes total sense. That makes total sense. The guy that I compared him to, and obviously this guy hasn't had a good career in the NFL, but had a heck of a career, was a first-round pick out of Arizona State, and N'Keal Harry. That's a guy he reminds me of, a guy who can kind of be a beast after the catch, win a ton of 50-50 balls. And, obviously you don't want to end up with one guy. Hopefully they're able to sign 2 or 3 here and, finish off with someone else. But if this is your one guy, at least you got to, I would say, as close to a sure thing as you're going to get, that this guy's going to be a great player.
And when you talk about the burst, that's something that can be worked on in college with someone like Matt Balis, right? Because that quick initial like 10-yard get out, right? And you can work on that as a high school player and that sort of thing. He's running track, so that helps. But then you get to Matt Balis, where it's like, okay, we're actually working on this explosiveness. You saw it with Miles Boykin, right?
Yeah.
Who he just, he was a long strider, and then he gets to Notre Dame, and suddenly he's running 4.42s and that sort of thing. So
Claypool as well.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to talk about a little bit like the strategy of, I guess I guess it's a Dell thing a little bit. Maybe it was like a team strategy of just always wanting that 3 and not wanting to kind of stray from that a little bit. Like the only year I know that they took more was 2018, I believe it was.
Yeah.
When they took 5, and that didn't really work out. So you kind of
And they originally
understand.
meant to be 4 because Wilkins switched from corner, right?
Right,
So,
right. So it just seems like this year especially, like you had to get 4, and we've known for a while that Walker was looking around. We've known for a while that um, CJ Williams was kind of like, he was poking around USC for a bit, right? He's been going a lot of their stuff, but there's been no real traction anywhere. Like where was a miss there? Like who? Like because I don't like, I'm short on names. Like who is even possible?
Well, I mean, I think that's the problem. There wasn't a
Right.
lot of guys
That's
that
what
were
I mean.
possible that were, so that's part of it. And they didn't want to take someone just to take a guy. So I think that played into it. But I mean, it's a lot of misses, a lot of guys that didn't work out, guys who switched positions, even, like, I mean, Cam Hart and X Watts, Cam Hart already is a starter, but X Watts could be a starter next year at safety too. That's 2 guys who are supposed to be receivers, right? So,
Yeah.
and not that it's a bad thing, because I think both could be both good players, but when you're not signing enough there, I mean, that changes things. And I think earlier, I want to say it was probably around the 2016 time, maybe a little bit before that, they had way too many receivers on the roster. They had like 16 scholarships going to receivers, and that's just way too many. Like, I don't care what kind of offense. And I remember BK talking about how, oh, we practice this way, you got to have that many. Well, that just means you're not signing enough corners, or you're not signing enough safeties or D linemen. And they were, I mean, one of the reasons why they were just brutal in depth and D line, they couldn't even rotate in some years, is because they didn't sign enough guys. So if they missed on any, they were screwed. So
Yeah.
I think that was part of it. And the problem is that when you tighten that down, you can't miss like there. And so that, you definitely, some of it's got to be put on Dell for how that's gone. But and I think too, because they haven't been able to do that, they've almost oversigned at tight end, which kind of leads into that. But at the same time, all these tight ends, like, there's guys who are good tight ends who could start at a lot of Power 5 schools that don't play at Notre Dame. Like George Takich obviously played, but he's just known. They're celebrating his touchdown and his last game, this regular season game as a senior. He could have started on a ton of teams, right? But he just happens to have Michael Mayer in front of him, and that's how it is. Kevin Bauman obviously was hurt most of the year. I mean, that guy could play on a lot of teams, and I expect him still to make an impact. But that's an aside. We'll get into the class here, and I think they signed another class. They signed 2 tight ends. They signed Kane Barong and Mitchell Evans in the previous class, and this one they went Eli Raridan out of Iowa, a guy who's a legacy recruit. His dad played at Notre Dame. Sky high ceiling, like, just phenomenal athlete. You see the guy, he's like 6'6", but he's probably only about 220, 225 right now, but he's shredded. Like, he can put on a lot of weight, be a lot stronger. I think he definitely needs to get stronger to be able to play as an inline guy, but certainly you see some of the stuff that he does, as he's just basically a big receiver now and moves incredibly well. This guy has a chance to be just a yak monster who just
they give him jets.
Yeah. And get on some of those crossers that Mayer runs and stuff, and this guy's going to gain a lot of yards. And I think that was the main thing too when you saw his senior film, is that he was more dynamic than he was before, and he was pretty dynamic as a junior too. So I couldn't be higher on him. I think he's a top 100 level talent, and a guy that, when you compare some of the recent guys that they've signed, easily could be another, Cole Kmet, Michael Mayer, that type of, he could be, that's how good he can be.
Yeah. And I think of him in comparison with Holden Stays, the other tight end in the class. Like, when you put them together, that's like, to me, that's what makes it, is because Holden has like, Holden himself could be almost like a Tommy Tremble type. But he's probably more of like ready to be a blocker than Raridan is. but because Holden himself is such a good athlete, when you put him next to Eli Raridan, who is like a super athlete, and like I said, they were putting him on jet sweeps, right? And he's, you know, getting in and out of blocks and getting out of, like, finding running lanes and that sort of thing. It's just like, it's a real big problem from just a matchup standpoint. And I think that people don't, like, appreciate how difficult it is to play big tight ends as a defensive back because they're so physically imposing. You can be there, and we've seen this a bunch with Michael Mayer, where guys are on his back, but they can't get around his body to get their hands on the ball and break up the pass. And I think Raridan, with his size, he's 6'6" right now. He's going to get bigger. Like, he's only going to get bigger. He's probably going to, his athleticism will either stay where it is or it'll increase. The same thing with Holden Stays. And I think putting those two together is just such like a imposing duo that it's like, that's why we opened the pod, when I said, you know, this is an elite group. That's what makes it elite, is because of the skill sets that mesh together so well.
Yeah. And I would say I agree with you in terms of Stays. I think a little bit more physical, a little bit more physically developed right now. I would say I like him as a prospect a lot. Definitely. I mean, Notre Dame doesn't take guys that don't have NFL potential. Certainly has NFL potential.
Yeah.
I would say you're just comparing him to Raridan, and yeah, he's a compliment. And I would say he's not dynamic though in any one area. He's good in just like every area, but not dynamic. So I mean, he might end up being one of the best tight ends in college football. Who knows, right? I mean, obviously Notre Dame does a heck of a job developing tight ends. But I would say, if we're looking at down the line, which one has the best chance of being like a Mackey Award contender, and which guy has a chance to be, you know, a starter still, Stays as starter potential. And I think Raridan has Mackey Award potential. Yeah. That's the way I would put it. All right, well, let's get into the we'll hold off on JD Price and Angeli last. We'll go with those guys last. Let's go with the offensive line. And you know, you mentioned maybe the best one in the country that they're signing. You know, we won't go deep on Billy Schrauth. We talked about him the other day, but just quick thoughts on Billy Schrauth and how big that was for Notre Dame to get him.
Well, it gives them the two guards, right? Because I believe Tanona is seen as a guard as well.
Yes, he's going
to be okay. So the way I look at it is they have an entire offensive line signed, right? So they have the two tackles in Chan and Wagner. They have the center in Craig, and then they have Tanona and Schrauth. I think the thing with Schrauth, and I was listening to you and Mike talk about it today on Power Hour, is he seems to play in the type of offense that isn't going to necessarily feature all of his skills, for one, and for two, like you said, the comp that he's playing against, it's just hard to gauge how good he is from a ceiling standpoint, right? But you look at all of the traits and you look at all of the athleticism, a guy just similar to Rocco Spindler in that they both played defensive tackle. So they could both play defense, really good athletes, nasty players. And when you pair that with Emil Wagner, who is, again, just a nasty, physical, aggressive player. And it's just like, you're talking about elite prospects, like people who, if things go right, and they have tended to go right for Notre Dame on the offensive line, you're talking about building elite prospects behind already elite prospects. And that is just kind of like the dream scenario. And like, you look at the last two classes, I just don't, I mean, I guess you could probably do better from like maybe a player or two, you know, you switch out, but given what's just kind of generally how recruiting works, I don't know how you could build the last two classes any better than Notre Dame has right now.
And I think what you said too about how, you know, you could put the whole offensive line and line them up across. I think that's kind of how you look at it, and how the previous class was constructed and all that. It makes perfect sense. And I just will say, you know, and I said on Power Hour today earlier that Trout, probably the most athletic guard that they've signed in the last 5 years. He's going to be even bigger than he is now. He should be able to carry well over 310, and checks all the boxes you want of a guy who has the potential to be great. Certainly raw and pass pro, raw with some of his technique stuff, but another guy that if could be one of the best in college football at his position. And then we'll go to the next guy who I also think has the potential to be one of the best at his position, and that's Emil Wagner. Needs to physically develop. He's only about 265 right now, 260, 265. You see his frame though, and the guy has a monstrous frame. And obviously there's precedent for guys like him who are also, dual sport athletes, guys who plays basketball too, who have put on that weight and been able to do it, and I know whatever people don't like me comparing him to USC guys, but Austin Jackson was one of those guys, became a first round pick for USC. Tyron Smith, another USC guy, similar. And I see that frame and that athleticism, I think to me is similar. And that's why you're excited about that. And, but from a Notre Dame perspective, like someone asked me from a Notre Dame's perspective, and I hate to do this because anyone who's like a big athletic left tackle type plays basketball, it's always Ronnie Stanley. But I would say meaner Ronnie Stanley, a guy who shows that he wants to finish, plays with violence, like wants to put guys in the ground. And certainly has the feet to be really, really good. Got to get rid of some false steps and some technical issues like all of these guys do. But really, I think, and because he's got Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Tosh Baker Carmody, whoever ahead of him, he's not going to be rushed into it. He's going to have time to physically develop. And then also we know from this year too, guys get hurt, all of a sudden he could get, and he certainly has the talent to be great and be really, really good. And I had him, after his junior year. I don't know if he'll finish that way. Probably, to me, he's a top 100 kid, but like was a top 50 kid for me heading into his junior year. I think he's, got a chance to be a really, really good multi-year starter at left tackle. Might just have to wait a while based on who's in front of him.
And I love the idea of getting these guys. So like Ty Chan fits into this too, as well as Joe Alt, like getting these guys who are really good athletes, who are a little bit smaller, putting weight on them. And then you have the good athlete who got weight put on in a college program, right? Yeah. So it's like you're doing it with Matt Bayless, or you're doing it with someone. It's like, hey, I know how to get this weight on, right? And then Blake didn't have to do that because Blake is special, but that's good too, right? You get a guy. Sometimes you get someone like Blake Fisher, who just is naturally gifted. He's big and he's athletic. He doesn't need to do all that stuff. He's already got the weight on, and that's great. But I do like that idea of you have athletes, you put weight on them, you build them up for 2 years, and then you cycle them through. They start for 2 or 3 years, and then you just keep the cycle going. And I think last year, because of the recruiting class that came in 2018, there was almost a gap, and there was like that gap year where it was really important that Notre Dame hit with Fisher and with Alt, and now that they can restart the cycle again, and there's just no reason to think now that they're not going to be what the kind of line that they've been for the next 3-4 years, even beyond that, right? Just given what the line looks like now, the young guys that they have in the program already, and then what they're signing right now. So it just looks really good.
Ty Chan, who you mentioned there too, as tackle, that I'm not 100% convinced he's going to be a tackle. I think he might end up a guard. I certainly think, he's kind of a guy who's just scratching the surface, missed his junior year because there's COVID in Massachusetts. They didn't play, have a high school season. Yeah. So, that was obviously, detrimental to his development. And I think, to me, it showed in a senior film, because I think technically, a bit too much of a leaner, needs some work. But I like the way he moves. Obviously plays defensive line. Think he's a good athlete. Certainly has a chance to be a mauler, needs to be more consistent. But to me, it's going to be really interesting to kind of see his development, because I think he's a guy that is going to need time. And, whoever the next offensive line coach will, we assume Jeff Quinn's going to coach the Bull and then be out, and it's going to be somebody else. Whoever's the next offensive line coach, that's going to take some time, in my opinion. It's going to take some time with him. Could be, obviously starter and good high level starter potential. But he's got to really work at it, in my opinion. But certainly a guy like, you take a guy like that, because 3 years down the road, he could be, a really, really quality starter.
Right. How did you feel about, because he put on weight already. So he was a thinner guy. I think it was like 250, 260, something like that. And then he put on the weight, then he played.
I think he put on a bit too much weight. I think so? That's how he looked to me.
So like, that's what we were talking about, is like, you do it in high school and it's not with Matt Balis, and it's like, it went kind of the wrong way.
He'll probably have to come, he'll probably get to Notre Dame, probably lose about 15, 20, whatever, and have to reshape it and just do it. And he's going to have that time, like we've already mentioned, with what they got in front of him. But
right.
I think that's what's going to probably happen to him. Kurt Heinisch, obviously played a different position, but he was the guy who put on a ton of weight because he wanted to compete early. And he put on a lot of bad weight on that first year when he was a freshman. And you saw how his body changed over time. I'm not talking about, he's not an Adonis, that's for sure. He's still not looking, he's not, he doesn't got an 8-pack. But compared to, his very first practice, I remember we were out at Culver and he's puking his guts out on the side because he was not in the greatest shape, and he was in, freshman shape. So, and then obviously 5 years later, the guy's, one of the, 3-year starter, tremendous leader, and a guy who probably leads a lot of the D-line, drills in terms of, his work ethic and stuff too. So, it can happen, right? It can happen. It definitely happens. And people shouldn't give up on anyone who shows up and they might need to reshape, because most kids do. There's more kids now that show up that are like in phenomenal shape and way better shape than you think. And everybody who subscribes to a Notre Dame site or, followed Notre Dame in social media and saw some of the freshmen, what they look like coming in this year. There's some guys that are like specimens already, but there's not a lot of linemen like that. Like you said, Blake Fisher, he's one of those guys like that's signing at Alabama or a Georgia type kid there. But, not a lot of guys in the Midwest built like that. But, we'll transition to Joey Tonona, who's first guy committed in the class. So never gets talked about, obviously. And a guy, like you said, projects probably to play guard, not the sexiest position. So very little talk about Joey Tonona. Hasn't had a senior film out. I have watched some of his senior stuff. I watched a full game one weekend about a month ago from him. Playing tackle, looked good. I thought he looked good. Really kind of efficient. I think he could potentially, in a pinch, maybe be a tackle. Certainly a higher ceiling at guard, and maybe even play center too. Have a chance at that. I think before he got a little, as a junior, I thought he got a little tight as pass set. I thought he was just a little bit more refined this year. I think he, certainly is another guy, likes to finish, put guys in the ground. The comp I had for him is Nick Martin, because a guy that, obviously Nick Martin played center, could have played guard at Notre Dame. Similar guy who's got kind of the kind of athletic trait, or the physical traits that you would want from a guy to play in the interior and be a really good, like, lunch bucket, really good player for Notre Dame.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. So when we build out this channel, we're gonna have to look at some film of these guys, and you can go over the things that you're looking for, because for me, just admittedly, like when I watch lineman film, sometimes I can see, like, I know enough about it to where it's like, oh, like he's struggling with his footwork here, struggling with his footwork there. But like you're talking about getting like high in your pass set, and you're talking about all these other things. Like we should go over that. Just in general, it's just like show people. And when I say people, I mean myself, because it's like, it's just, it's like, it's hard for me when I watch linemen, like especially Joey Tsunoda and Ashton Craig was like this too. Like some guys you can tell like just the athletic traits, right? So like
Yeah.
Emil Wagner or Billy Schroth, right? Like you can just tell they're elite athletes. Other guys, when they play other people who are a lot smaller than them, you can't. It's hard
It's
to
hard.
differentiate.
I
It's
think
hard
it's a
to, and if you
perfect
don't do it a
example.
lot, yeah, like you don't. If you don't do it a lot, it's hard to differentiate. It's like okay,
If
it,
all of a
it seems like
sudden
he's crushing people. Is
he's
this
six
good? Is it
five and
not?
he's going against a 5'8" defensive end, and
Yeah,
sometimes you'll do that. And you're
yeah,
playing rural Indiana, and you're playing some teams. That's just who they have. And maybe
right,
their starting defensive end is a MAC level guy normally, but that guy's out this week, and then the
right.
5'8" backups in. So you never know, right? So um, that's something that I think it's tough to judge, and that's why too I'm always concentrating on traits more than because if you
Mm-hmm.
get caught up in just the competition, I mean, you just say all the guys who are playing, in that Southern California, that league with Modern Day and Servite and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, you would just pick and choose guys and go skill guys there, but then you would pass over a guy like Tobias Merriweather, who's not playing the top competition
Mm-hmm.
in state of Washington, where he's like kind of Southern Washington, not the greatest comp there, but certainly you can't deny that the guy's got awesome traits, right? So, and that kind of brings up too with Craig, who was a guy. He's another guy from Indiana. I think to me one of the most underrated guys in the class. Really good athlete for his size. Could play center. Jarrett Patterson is the guy that he reminded me of because in terms
Yeah.
of his feet, just the way he moves. I think he needs some time, obviously, to develop physically and technically. But man, I really like him. I think he has a chance to be just, he's rare with the way he can move for an interior guy. Like if he plays center at Notre Dame, he's a guy that they could pull. And I mean, he'll be able to do some things that not a lot of centers that they've had can do. And they've had some pretty good centers, right?
Yeah.
So I think he has a chance to be really, really good. And I earned the offer at camp. I really liked it at the time after watching him. I thought he had a good senior season, but always the thing with him and like a lot of these guys, I mean, he's playing like, blocking those 5'8" DNs on some
Yeah.
plays, and you have to
And
be able to
when you
judge that.
say like earned offer at camp, like that to me is like, okay, he went to Notre Dame. They got to see him move around. They got to see him, what his body looks like. They got to see like the traits you talked about. Probably the same thing with Tsunoda as well. So it's just one of those things. Like to me, it's like when a guy goes to camp and he earns a scholarship that way. And I think he was going to do the same at Ohio State. I don't know if Ohio State actually ended up offering, because if I remember correctly, he earned their Notre Dame offer, was going to their camp or like camped with them, earned the Notre Dame offer, and then went back. And it was kind of known like when he goes back, he's probably going to commit. And I don't
Yeah.
know if Ohio State actually jumped in at that point. It's hard for me to remember. It was just like back in June, but it was like people knew, like once people saw him, it was like, okay, we want to get in on this recruit because he's a really good player.
Yeah. And he's going to be a guy who's going to be at the All-American Bowl and stuff too. So he's going to go against better competition, get a chance to kind of see him. Sometimes, that's a transition for a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly Tristan Hodge, perfect example of Notre Dame guy. I watched him live at the opening, and he was a guy who dominated, Idaho. He's playing football in Southeast Idaho at a good school, at a really good school. Highland, really good school. Shout out to Pocatello, Idaho there. Go Bengals, ISU Bengals. But when he got against like dudes at the opening, he got overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it was a transition for him. And I think it was a transition for him at Notre Dame. I think he's ended up having a pretty decent time at BYU and kind of turning it around and being a decent player there. But I mean, certainly it took him a while. So that's something that, I mean, we'll have to see with a guy like Ashton Craig. It's always something when someone's from a small school and you see how that goes. Finishing it off, like you mentioned about the backs, they didn't land Nicholas Singleton. I think a lot of people were upset about that. That was a guy that they really wanted, they forgot that JD Price was already in the class. And certainly there was, I think Notre Dame, if Singleton wanted to come still, if he all of a sudden just called them up and said, "Hey, I'm out on Penn State," and come, they're like, "Come on it," right?
Yeah.
They would
Oh,
invite
yeah.
him in. In saying that, JD Price is not a consolation prize. I think he's a great prospect. I know you're pretty high on him too.
Yeah, I mean, I love his game. I love the way like he has that two-step burst that like Dexter has. And you see it in a lot of the workout clips that he showed where he's in and out of cones and stuff. And then he puts his foot down and he goes and he has that two-step burst that like allows him to get through holes that are quick closing. And then he's in the second level and then he's, making people miss in the backfield. And it's just like I loved his sophomore film. So going from like sophomore to junior year and now this senior year, he put up huge numbers in Texas. He did it as a receiver. He did it inside, outside. He's a tough inside runner. He's not jukey like Kyron. He's more of like a get north and south, maybe one cut on somebody like Dexter was. I think he has probably longer speed than Dexter did. Dexter was more of like a quick burst and then he's just kind of hanging in there. Whereas I think JD Price is more of a home run guy. But yeah, like he's good size. He has this the ability to have when tacklers kind of hit him from the side, he kind of shucks them and keeps going.
Yeah, he's
And
got good balance.
that's something that Kyron Williams is really good at. And JD Price does it as a much taller player. So just like, like super excited about him. I was never like, oh, we need Nicholas Singleton because JD Price is nice for depth. Like, no. JD Price can play. And I think he's an early enrollee. I would not be shocked if he got time next year.
Yeah, well, I think anyone who can be explosive, and I mean, he's explosive. That's the best part of his game is, like you said, he can be a home run hitter. He's a guy who can just take it the distance. And I think just vision, balance, speed. I mean, you check those boxes as running back, and you're going to run behind with this offensive line that we're saying has a chance to be really, really good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's going to be some holes there, and I think he's going to have a chance to be a really big play guy for Notre Dame. And like a Chris Tyree. And to me, I wouldn't put him exactly, he's not at the same levels that I viewed Tyree when he was coming in, but to me, he's somewhere in the same ballpark in terms of a big play guy. And that's what, I mean, to me, Logan Diggs, I wouldn't say I think he's a really good natural running back, has great patience, great vision, all that kind of stuff, great feet, but more of a banger, more of a guy, more of an inside guy. Not a guy who I imagine is going to take too many, 60 to the crib. Astemi, obviously, way better feet than anyone would expect for a guy his size, but still, he's a different type of runner, a different body type, right? And to me, that's what you have to do. You have to find these different types there. And especially because you consider, Chris Tyree's probably got 2 years left. You want to have a guy who's there too. Or if, something happens with Tyree, obviously had the turf toe this year, you want to have that kind of, you want to have mix and match styles that you can go to. And I think that to me is one of the things that's most exciting about him is that he has what they need. I think he has a chance to be great at Notre Dame.
And when you look at Diggs, so it's not just that whether Diggs has like long speed or whatever, it's kind of besides the point for the defense because the defense is not going to react to him bouncing something outside the same way they would Tyree or Price because you're not afraid necessarily of them turning the corner. And you just react differently. Like you see Tyree or Price try to turn the corner and you are thinking, I got to get on my horse because if they get around a corner, they're going to go to the house. And so you just react like, oh, I got to get going, and that sets the backup to then say, okay, I can cut inside of you now.
Yeah,
And
changes
it
the
just,
angle.
yeah, it changes everything. And so that's kind of the difference. It's not so much that Diggs is incapable, it's that he the defense doesn't believe in it, right? They don't have the fear, right? It's same thing with like a wide receiver who, like Will Fuller, right? Defenses are going to play him different. Corners will play him different than someone like
Boykin, yeah.
Yeah, Boykin,
Yeah.
or I'm trying to think of someone on the team, or Kevin, like I guess Kevin Austin, right? Although
Yeah.
Kevin Austin go deep, but it's just like a different type of
Yes.
player where it's
Yeah.
just like,
When you're bailing against Fuller, I mean, you're really bailing, like, you
right,
know, you
like
have to do
yeah,
it.
or like
And
Javon
that's why the
McKinley.
comeback is going to be open way more.
Yeah, Javon McKinley, like it's a perfect example.
Yeah.
So it's just like that's the thing that Price gives. It's like he puts the fear in the defense.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, people should, if you're not excited about him, get excited about him. I think he's got a chance to be great. You know, lastly, we'll finish off with Steve Angeli, you know, the quarterback they signed out of New Jersey, or going to sign out of New Jersey. You know, you mentioned at the beginning, one of the first offers that they had in the class, it was him and Gavin Wimsett, who ended up at Rutgers, who's very different than him, much more of like a bigger, more dynamic runner, bigger arm, you know, way less polished, right? And but certainly just big time traits. And then, you know, they offered some other guys, obviously, who were some elite guys, but Angeli was a guy they liked from the start. You know, that Tommy Rees really liked from the start and was on him. And I liked Angeli too. I certainly think he's not the most exciting in terms of, there's not elite in any one area where it's doing it. But you know what? You could say that about a lot of great quarterbacks.
Right.
It doesn't mean that if you're good at everything, then you can be good. And I think combined with his junior year, it was a short junior year because of COVID, you know,
Right.
played only 6 games in a passing offense where they were like about 65% pass. So he didn't throw the ball that much, didn't have a ton of skill talent around him, and had a little bit underwhelming numbers. And then he went out, and I think because of that year, and then because of, you know, he went out, tried for Elite 11, didn't make the Elite 11. So I think people got down on it. And so those people, you know, knocked it, his grades went down on 24/7 Rivals, or maybe not on Rivals, I'm not sure, but 24/7 definitely knocked him down. I'm not sure what ESPN had him, but he certainly wasn't viewed the exact same that he was before. Came out, had a monster senior year, like just extremely huge numbers. They threw the ball a lot more, obviously. And I have to say, I really like him. I like him as a player. Certainly, if you're going to give me a choice, I'm always going to take the dual threat guy. I'm always going to take the dual threat guy as a defender, as someone who coached defense. I'm always thinking, man, that guy's always way harder to do that. In saying that, Angeli, good athlete, not someone they're going to call design runs for, but could actually pull it on a zone read and, you know, sneak away for like a 30-yard gain or something, because he's a decent enough runner. He's got a good feel for the rush. He can escape the pocket. He's accurate, above average arm talent. You know, there's a lot to like about him. But, you know, certainly I think handles pressure in his face well. And I think that's super underrated, because there's a lot of guys where it's like 7-on-7 for them out there where they're not getting touched, and they have all day, and their receivers are that much better than everyone. So of course the highlights are going to look amazing, but it's not that way. And that was one thing with Logan Diggs previous year. And obviously it's a different position, but I mean, the guy was getting hit in the backfield all the time, but, you know, turning 8-yard runs, but I mean, they were as good as 80-yard runs the way that he had to break tackles. So I think with Angeli, that's the way I kind of see it. Is it wouldn't surprise me if he is a starter for Notre Dame, and a good one. But he doesn't have any of the things that it's a little bit Ian Bookish, where you're like, I don't know, but this is, well, although say Ian Book, when it turned out, pretty dynamic athlete,
Yeah.
but that was the same kind of thing where no one's overly excited. No one's going to be overly excited about Steve Angeli. They're waiting for the 2023. Everybody's already waiting
Right.
for the 2023
Right.
guy. And I'm saying, don't chill out on that for a minute, because I think Angeli, I wouldn't count him out. And I know Drew Pine, expect him back. I expect him back this year. So it should be him and Buckner, maybe a transfer. Ronnie Powles. Ronnie Powles is never going to play at Notre Dame. He's always going to be a practice guy. But Ronnie Powles is on the roster. Angeli, I mean, not going to make a move as a freshman. I would highly doubt that. But if Drew Pine is gone, I mean, it's not automatic that the 2023 guy is going to jump the line, because I think Steve Angeli, I think people need to give him a chance, because I think he has, there's a little bit of an it factor with him too, that I think that he has, that people aren't giving him enough credit for.
Right. And he's the kind of the catalyst for the recruiting class on offense, at least. So he's already taken like the alpha status on that front, which means something to some people. I think it shows something in him, right? To his mobility, I always look at it like, if you're not going to be like Tyler Buckner, right, where you're like a super dynamic athlete where they're calling, quarterback counter and quarterback draw for you and that sort of thing, then can you move the pocket? Can you get out of the pocket? Can you throw on the run and that sort of thing? Angeli can do those things, right? So we just saw Jack Cohn be basically immobile and be a successful quarterback on the second half of the year, right? We saw it happen, right? So there's ways to, take someone's skill set and build an offense around him. It's like, the question is,
Mac Jones is not an athletic quarterback.
Right. Are you accurate? Can you get the ball out where it needs to go? Do you know where it needs to go?
You throw with anticipation.
Right.
Can you handle the rush? Yeah.
Because so much of what Ian's shortcoming was not his size, and it was not his arm, and it was not his athleticism. His problem was he wasn't always good at dissecting, where's the defense, where did I need to go with the ball? And that
was mostly a one read guy.
Right. And if it wasn't there, then he's gone, or he's trying to be gone. And sometimes that was good for him. And in the bigger games, it was not. Right. You're playing better athletes, better defenses, better coach defenses, and they're going to eat that stuff up. Right. So the question is, for Angeli, can he do those things? Right. He's doing them in high school. Right. He's having so many games like early in the year, it's like 15 to 16, or he's 16 to 17, or he's, 17 of 20. Right. And he's just dropping dimes all over the place. And he looks good, obviously. Like, he's got a very good team. I think earlier you said 65% pass. I think you meant 65% run.
Oh, 65% run. Yeah.
That's what I meant. So
as a junior,
so he's playing at a school where it's like, we have the studs up front and we're going to push our advantage all the time. But he had a much better season this year, like you said. And I think that people are down on him, not because of the player he is, but because of the perception that they could have had someone better. Right. If only they had offered Drew Aller sooner, or if they had moved on Gavin Wimsett, or if they had, they were kicking around Walker Howard for a little bit. Right. Like, it's like, oh, we want that. And it's almost like the JD Price situation, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I think that more so because it's the quarterback and it's such an important position. And it's been kind of the narrative was like, this is what's holding
everyone knows you need an elite quarterback to win, and people question whether or not he can be elite. And I mean, I don't know that he's going to be elite. I just know that, I don't know that he's not going to be elite though. Like, I don't know that he can't be. So, and that would be my main message with him, is that I don't think that it's as simple as, he's not good enough, he's never going to be elite. I think people need to let it play out and kind of see where it goes. So that's the way I kind of feel about it. And I think this class overall, just kind of reviewing it, like, I mean, it's a pretty strong class. Yeah. Like, it's pretty much all blue chips, really. Right. And when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, there's a chance to be really, really good, especially when you put it on top of the freshman class that they have right now, and you see guys making an impact already. Um, but it is going to be judged on how Angeli is developed and all that, because um, or the next guy, or if Tyler Buckner's the guy, like that, the quarterback is always going to be the deciding factor. So
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see how it goes, but you know, I think this, if you know, if Notre Dame goes 100% on this crew, people should be very happy. We'll see what happens. CJ Williams, like we said, I mean, think things are up in the air right now. Maureen Walker, we're hearing good things. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But you know, we'll come back tomorrow with our review of the defense and kind of previewing the defense and all that. Looking forward to that. And yeah, we'll see all you guys then. Thanks to Greg. You know, sign up for Irish Sports Daily. There's a free, not a free, but $1 for your the first week if you sign up right now. Tons of great stuff, tons of great content on the site right now. Obviously, ton of stuff going on with you know, Marcus Freeman's first week practice reports and stuff. There's going to be, you know, closing out and recruiting. There's going to be a lot more coaching news that's coming. You know, probably get leaked out some before the bowl game, some a lot after the bowl game. So great time to sign up right now. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.